this morning. And I just want to start again by welcoming everybody and saying how wonderful it is to have you all here today for our September Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinar. I'm Charlotte Glen. I'm the State Coordinator for the Extension Master Gardener Program. I have just a few opening announcements before we jump in to our main guest speaker today, who is Chuck Bargeron, and he is joining us from the University of Georgia. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in just a minute, and we'll get his presentation started. Of course, after our guest presenter today, we'll have our monthly BOLOs. Those are Be on the Lookout. Those are pest and disease issues that you should potentially see in the garden and around the landscape in the coming month. And of course, those will be shared by Matt Bertone, who's the director of the NC State Plant Insect Clinic, and Mike Munster, who is our disease diagnostician at the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. And Caroline will finish us out with the resource spotlight and Extension Master Gardener program announcements. And of course, Caroline is our wonderful program assistant here with the NC Extension Master Gardener program. So we look forward to a wonderful webinar today. Have a quick announcement. To get things started, we want to give a big shout out to the Extension Master Gardener volunteers in Durham County, and a heartfelt thank you for their recent donation to the North Carolina Extension Master Gardener Endowment. Not only did they make a generous gift this year, but they have made a commitment to give in future years as their fundraising and budget allows. So we really appreciate this dedication that they have and commitment they've made to growing the impact of the NC State Extension Master Gardener program, and are honored to have their support. And this is a great time, of course, just to share that, encourage you to think about making a donation, either as an individual or as a group, to our statewide endowment in 2024, or beforehand if you wish. The goals of our endowment are to provide financial stability for the NC State Extension Master Gardener program and additional staff positions, and all of the possible exciting new opportunities for Extension Master Gardener volunteers across North Carolina. This could include things such as volunteer scholarships, the development of programming materials, and new continuing education classes and workshops. Donations to the endowment are invested in perpetuity, an easy word to say, and they help increase the annual interest income that is generated. Currently, we see around $4,000 per year in that annual interest income, but the more donations, the more we build that principal, the greater that amount will be, and the more impact we'll be able to have. So we encourage you to help us all do more by considering making a gift in 2024. All right, and with that, I am so pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Chuck Bargeron. Chuck has been with the University of Georgia for 24 years. His work focuses on mapping invasive species and using tools for early detection and rapid response. Chuck has been an invited speaker at over 300 regional and national conferences and co-authored over 62 journal articles and outreach publications. And he was recently reappointed to the National Invasive Species Advisory Committee for a third term. So we're so glad to have him here with us today to tell us about EDDMapS, which is a web and smartphone-based mapping system for documenting invasive species and pest distribution. With over 7.5 million records, EDDMapS is the most comprehensive source of invasive species and pest distribution data in North America. So thank you for being with us today, Chuck, and we look forward to hearing more about how we can contribute to EDDMapS.
Sounds great. Thank y'all for having me. See if I can't get this share taken care of. And
that looks great.
Perfect. Okay, so Chuck Bargeron, and I'm with the University of Georgia, actually located in Tifton, Georgia, which is about an hour from the Florida line on I-75. And yeah, I'm gonna tell you about our EDDMapS program and how you can get involved and how you can make it even better than what it is now with your participation and your input. So the Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health, which is where I'm located, or we go by Bugwood, is our URL and kind of our nickname. And that goes back to, we were originally founded by a entomologist and a forester, and hence Bugwood. So what we do is a little different than what a lot of university groups do. Our focus is 100% on extension, on outreach. And so we do very little research in our group. We don't do any teaching. It is all focused on outreach, adult education type activities. We're a collaboration between the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences and the School of Forestry and Natural Resources. And along with invasive species, we also do a lot of work on integrated pest management and forest health. The Southern Region IPM Center, which is a collaboration between the University of Georgia and North Carolina State, is also part of our center here. And a lot of what we do, and a lot of the reason why I'm going to show you what I'm going to show you today, is because we try to make information technology easy and usable for the public to help solve problems. And so that requires a lot of partnerships and a lot of working across disciplines and across boundaries. And so I found this graphic talking about what partnerships were in information technology and training and research, and I thought it really does a good job of explaining all the different pieces to what me and my team do. If you've heard Bugwood, you may be familiar with our image database system. We have 5 different websites that you can access over 300,000 pictures. Those are forestry images, IPM images, insect images, weed images, and invasive.org. And so if you've ever seen a picture with the black box in the corner and a number, that came from our image database system. And just a quick look at how that works, and you can go in and filter results and then select high resolution pictures that are free to use for educational purposes. We've expanded that to cover other content types such as presentations, video, and we're building this huge resource database of publications, archiving them permanently, giving them a permanent link, so they'll never disappear, and then using that to integrate into other systems. And so about 15 years ago now, we realized that there was a big problem with not knowing the current distribution, especially of invasive plant species. There was the USDA plants database, but it was not accurate and not updated for a lot of species. And so we started what is now called EDDMapS as a solution to that problem, a way to make it very easy to track invasive species and then later pest occurrences. And so it would work both at a very local scale as well as at a national or North American scale to really see the distribution of these species. And then making electronic tools to make it very easy for users to report when they find something new. And I'll show you some examples of how this has really worked toward the end of the presentation. And then this is all linked in to our library of pictures and management information and identification information that is part of that resource database I mentioned earlier. So we created this. There's a lot of ways you can map things, and a lot of people use the Esri ArcGIS platform to map things. But when we started looking at how we wanted this to work and how we wanted it to be a resource for master gardeners, master naturalists, as well as just the general public that doesn't have any training, we realized that we needed something easier. And so we started with the Google Map style backbone for this, because a lot of our target audience were not going to be experts in using the ArcGIS, the Esri ArcGIS products. And we wanted to, in the invasive species world, we wanted there to be an action that everybody could do. And so for whatever species, whether it's something that's pretty common or the first time it's being found in a state, being able to make it very simple to report something, and then there be a follow-up for that. I always get the question, what kind of information are you looking for? And it's pretty easy. We need to know what was seen. We need to know who saw it, how much of it was there, when did they see it, where did they see it. The smartphone makes the when and where very easily. How do you think it got there? And why are you reporting it? And so almost everything you're going to see with what we do with reporting is kind of based on that key information. We also went through, and this was part of a study that was done, and looked at each action within an early detection rapid response event, and went through and figured out how this should work within the EDDMapS system, who needs to be notified, who has jurisdiction, and then what the follow-up was. We also wanted all the data that came into this to be very accessible, very easy to use, very easy to move into models, and I'll show you some examples of that as well. And then we wanted to put all the pieces together where there's different options for different users. And so I'm going to show you some of those options. And then, whether you're a casual user, whether you're the general public and you just happen to see something, and then also for professionals and researchers. So we launched at the EDDMapS website in 2005, 2006 timeframe. The first app we created was I've Got One. It was focused on the pythons and other invasives in Florida. That quickly expanded, and we started building these regional smartphone applications in order to make it easy to focus the application on the user, on the species of interest for that geographic area. And of course, we also had reporting forms on the website, and those are a little more comprehensive because if you're sitting at a computer reporting something, you're more likely to fill out more information. So a couple of years ago, we realized that it was not sustainable to manage all these regional apps. And so we developed the EDDMapS app. And the EDDMapS app, what it does when you first open the app is it asks you what state you're located in. And so it downloads the species that are appropriate for that state into the application. And that includes field guides. It includes the information that you need to be able to report something, in your area. So there's not species that just occur in California when you choose North Carolina. And then we built the EDDMapS Pro app. And I'm not going to go into that very much today, but this is more if you're managing a data set within an area. So if the Western United States has county weed managers, and they manage all of the data in their county. And so they needed a way to download that data and update that data in the field. So EDDMapS has over time has become very, very successful in my mind. Here is just a number of reports per county all time within EDDMapS, and really showing the full coverage throughout the US and Canada. We mentioned we have over 7.5 million records. We've had 44,000 either data sets that have come in or individual users that have reported things. And our focus is primarily on plants, but we do have a fair amount of wildlife reports as well as diseases and insect pests. So we built this tool that I'm going to explain a little bit more to try to be the ultimate aggregator of data. We wanted to work across those initial boundaries in order to pull data sets from the U.S. Forest Service, from the Park Service, from Fish and Wildlife Service, from state agencies, and put them all in one place so you could go and have as much of the authoritative source of where these species are found as possible. Is it complete? No, it never will be, but it's a start. And so now that we kind of have gotten this framework, we're now trying to focus more on how users can use the data. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So last year, we averaged about 500 new records coming in a day. And that was a fairly significant increase from the year before. And so we're seeing this even over time, the use continue. But there's definitely opportunities for more use, especially in North Carolina. So here's the data that came in by county in 2002. And as you can see, there's a few states where EDDMapS is their, state database of record. We have agreements with the state agencies, and so or provincial agencies in Canada, and so they have a lot of outreach programs going on, and that's why some of these states are filled in more than others. And so if you see this, and it shows where there's some opportunity. There was some data that came in for North Carolina in 2022, but there's also an opportunity there. We built a network of verifiers who get these records and look at them and approve them before they become public. And so about 97% of all the records in EDDMapS have been verified and are made public. And that is because of that network of 958 verifiers. And that can be state level verifiers, it can be national level verifiers for a specific species. If it's a regulatory insect or disease, then it automatically goes to the state plant health director, as well as the state Department of Ag lead. And so we don't make anything public until somebody has checked off on it. And you can go onto our website under tools, and there's a verifier lookup tool where you can choose a species, drop a point, and it will show you who the current verifiers are for that location, for that species. And it also lets you know, in this case, has it previously been reported in Montana? Has it previously been reported in that county? And so, and as thinking about preparing for this presentation, I went, we may need to make sure that those verifiers are current in North Carolina, but that's something we could do in the future. And I know those are updated routinely. We also pull invasive species data, the invasive species data of research grade reports from the iNaturalist system, and our verifiers are slowly working through those and moving the records that are appropriate into EDDMapS. I know we did a lot of Cali Pear data recently for a project we were working on. And this data gets used. People visit the websites. Over the past few years, we've had about 2 million visitors to the website and over 9 million page views. There's also alerts. So if you're interested in knowing when something is found in an area and been verified, you can sign up for an alert on the EDDMapS website. And we've got about 2,000 users that have done that. And we've sent out over almost 300,000 email alerts since we started tracking that in February of 2020. So one of the key things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about the app briefly, is just the data. And I'm going to go through this very quickly, but the resources that are behind the data, it's more than just the reporting tools. So let's take a species like garlic mustard. Garlic mustard, fairly big problem across the U.S. We have a comprehensive fact sheet about garlic mustard. We have down here at the bottom resources, links to other information about garlic mustard. We have a selected group of pictures of garlic mustard. You can see the distribution maps. And then we tell you everybody who has listed garlic mustard as a problem. So a database of, we do not decide what goes into EDDMapS in terms of what species are invasive. We let others decide that. And then we compile those lists into one place. And then you can see all those references on the EDDMapS website. And then we have more information, other common names, scientific names, as well as taxonomic information and links to other databases. And then you go into the maps. So here is the national North American distribution map for garlic mustard. You can see kind of where it's found. We also do these maps at the county level where you can see, a little bit better because of the way the points show up on the point map, what the distribution of the species looks like. You can look at that through the density of it. You can also look at it as whether or not something was a herbarium record or something was an observation that came into EDDMapS, or maybe the county has both, and that's what's represented on this map. And then we've worked with our partners in the modeling community to take their models and put those maps into EDDMapS. So what could the spread of garlic mustard look like based on climate change? How certain are we of that? And then based on the habitat and the abundance, how else do we see this spread? And so trying to integrate these models, which sometimes can be very confusing, into a way that users can see them in a format they're used to seeing. We've also started linking public lands into any report that comes into EDDMapS. And so, as you can see, this report was on Dinosaur National Monument. We've now updated these where these links are hot. And so you can click on Chuachia State Park, and it takes you to that park and it shows you what other species are found in that park. So really great tool if you're managing a small local area and you're trying to really tell a different story. And in this case, you see a lot of red on this map. Well, the yellow indicates a treated location. So if your team was going and you were removing the invasives, or you were treating the invasives, then you could go in, change those records in EDDMapS to treated, and then you would tell a different story about that data. And here's just a list of the species found. And you can also browse by geographic location under the database tools page, where you can go, and I just chose Tift County where I live. Here are the public lands in Tift County. I clicked on Forward Park, just a city park, and I can see what has been reported in that park, as well as a buffer of 5 miles around that park. So what should we be looking out for coming into the park? And this is one of the things I'll go through this, and then we'll talk about the app, but that I'm really proud of where the data has come. So let's take a species like kudzu. When we started EDDMapS in 2006, this is what we knew the distribution of kudzu was. From every data source we could pull together, this is what the distribution of kudzu looked like. And you may go, well, we know it's a lot more widespread than that. Yes, but it was not documented there. And so you look at what that map looks like today and how we have really filled in a lot of the gaps. The species has not spread that much. It's just now we know a lot better where it has been found. And then that makes it even more interesting when you start looking at the models of where it can potentially spread. We've done some other types of modeling. This is kind of, where it has the potential. I think this was for brown marmorated stink bug, where it has the potential to spread, and then where we know we have documentation of it. And then another similar map where here's the habitats where it can be found in. Let's truth that by looking at what the distribution of the species is. So now the cool part. How can you help? How can you help build this data set? So the first thing you do is download the EDDMapS app. It's available, just EDDMapS, not Pro, not Biocontrol, just EDDMapS. Start there, download the app. It's going to tell you a little bit about the app when you first go in. You're going to choose your state that you live in or you're currently in. It's going to download the field guide. And then it's going to give you a bunch of options. And one of the options here is the EDDMapS login. And so at some point, either through the app or through the EDDMapS website, you need to create an EDDMapS account. And the purpose of that account is, well, first of all, it allows you to group and manage all your records that you've reported. It also allows the verifiers a way to get in touch with you if there's something that they need to follow up with about the report. And so, I know it's one more place to sign in, and we're looking at ways to do better login where you could use your Google ID or Microsoft ID or Facebook ID to log into the app. And we've built some of that functionality, but we're continuing to improve that to make it easy where you don't have to remember one other password. But by providing your contact information, just an email address. It gives us a way to get back in touch with you if there's a question from a verifier. And beyond that, other than maybe an occasional, hey, we're doing this, or this new version's out that you should look at, that's all the only way we use that information, and it's not available, it's secure, and it's not available to anybody else. So here's the login page and the page to register a new account. You can make your public, you can make your profile private, or you can make it public when you set up the account. And then here's what the home screen of the app looks like. And so you see the options here. You can report a new observation, whether that's positive data or negative data, or you can go through and learn more about the species in your area. So we're going to start off with the new sighting. So you click on that. It gives you a form to fill out. You choose what species, you choose the observation date. You can hide the location from the public. The verifiers would still be able to see it, but the public would not be able to see it. When you saw it, it'll take your current location if you're in the field, or you can click on the tap location, and that will allow you to move the point to exactly where it was, or draw a polygon of that infestation. And then there's just a couple of other fields. It keeps track, at least says it took you 5 minutes to do it. You can choose the habitat as well as the density of the species. You can take pictures directly on your phone and upload them. I think it limits to 5 pictures. And then, like I said, you can edit your location or go in and draw a polygon of where the infestation was. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that, either freeform sketch or dropping the corners of a polygon. So time spent surveying, that's great for helping count volunteer hours. Then you have, well, okay, did you treat it while you were there? And if so, you go ahead and mark it as treated when you make that report. Or did you just find it and you're going to go back and treat it? And then how much was found, just an estimate. If you draw a polygon, it automatically calculates the infestation size. And then what is the density of that infestation within the area? It's basic information to help us know the extent of what that infestation is. So all those reports you made are saved in your upload queue, unless you say automatically upload. So it allows you to wait till you're on Wi-Fi to upload the reports, or it allows you to just go back and kind of manage those reports on your phone until you're ready to submit them. And so once they're in your queue, it'll show you how many are in the queue. You can go in and say, okay, well, that one I'm not sure about, I'm going to delete it. And so you can delete that, or you can select them and submit them to the server. So there's information about the species also on the page. You can see a list of the species. There's pictures to go along with it, as well as an information page for most of the species. And then you can see the live distribution maps of where that species has been found before while you're in the application. If there's a handful of species that you really feel comfortable with, and those are what you're going to primarily be reporting, then you can set up your My Species list. You can go through, it will show you the species. You can check the few that you want to be on your species list, and then it makes it a little bit easier for you to make those reports in the future. We have settings. We're going to continue to update those settings. We're also going to incorporate ways to see all species near you, and then a little bit more about, some graphs and more information about your user stats and how much you've done, just to kind of build that user experience part of the application. If you run into a problem with the app, no piece of software is ever perfect. There's a feedback button. And the nice thing about that feedback button is it gives us information about what version of the app you're using and what kind of phone you're using. So we can try to reproduce that problem and fix whatever bug is there. So that's the app as a whole. There's a few other things I want to use a little bit of time to talk about. but I hope you will download it, create an account, and give it a try. It's again available for iPhone as well as the Android platform. I mentioned earlier that we're really looking at ways to better use the data. And so last week we launched what is called our advanced query tool. Again, that's located on the tools page of EDDMapS. And we really tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. So this allows you to query the database for any amount of information you want. So if you want to know every Japanese honeysuckle report that's ever been made from this time period to this time period in this county in North Carolina, then this will walk you through selecting that data, and then it will update the map automatically while you're doing that. So an easy, great way to pull data and look for data within the database. We recently updated all the maps to include Canada. So now when you're looking at a distribution map, it's both the US and Canada. We've started caching some of the large data sets when you've got over 200,000 records of a species. Showing those all on the map at the same time can be a little slow. So we've optimized some of that to make these maps load quicker. We implementing the pie chart clustering. So previously you would just see clusters and you'd have to click on them to see if there were different colors represented. And so now you can go in and you can see all of those as pie charts and be able to diagnose the information, of what it is, whether it was treated or a positive report. We've also replaced with Google Maps for some of the maps with OpenStreetMap. This was because Google started charging for integrating their maps into the page, and this was a quick and easy way to be able to include that. You still have the photographic imagery is available, and so you can still see all that. We also kind of standardize the color scheme and made it colorblind friendly. And we do a lot to promote the EDDMapS system, whether it's speaking at conferences, whether it's holding an annual virtual summit online that's usually in March or April, as well as archiving all of those videos, creating short how-to videos, downloadable presentations. All of that's available under the training page on EDDMapS. We've also started doing monthly office hours. So we go in each month. These are linked off of the training page as well. And we pick a topic and we talk about that topic, but then anybody that wants to come on and ask questions, they are welcome to. And so those are available live as well as archived on YouTube, and as well as the EDDMapS website. When you start looking for apps, there is also an app called EDDMapS Biocontrol. This is part of a project we're doing that is trying to create this resource of biocontrol nationally. And so that is ibiocontrol.org is the website, but then the EDDMapS Biocontrol app is really focused on reporting information about biocontrol agents. And there's fact sheet information available about that, as well as the weeds in that application. The last project that's tied into EDDMapS that I want to mention is called Wild Spotter. This is something we started with the U.S. Forest Service, and it's focused on visitors to public lands. Initially the national forest, but we're hoping to expand it to all public lands, especially federal public lands. And so a very simple application, I think of it as EDDMapS Lite, but targeted to an audience that has not gone through a training, but will find this application and can very easily report something within their public lands. We're also adding other features like national checklists, so you can keep up with what national forest you visited or what grasslands or what parks. And we built a lot of partners in doing this. And if this is something we also could expand to North Carolina state parks. And so if anybody knows someone with North Carolina state parks that would be interested in in integrating that into the app, please let us know. To continue to build this program, we're hosting a training in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this December. And this is really looking at all of the tools around invasive species that nobody has ever taught in the invasive species world. So how do you build partnerships? How do you engage stakeholders? How do you brand things? How do you make it a project within your community to really amp up and have what you need? And so if you're interested in that or know others that may be, the registration is at invasivesfree.org. And the cost is like $300, and it's 3 full days of training on these topics. So EDDMapS is 17 years old and still growing strong. We're looking at different ways to use projects, better ways to download. We've seen it be effective for all taxa. And, the key is to build partnerships, to make it easy, to use reporting as a tool to help teach others about the problem of invasive species, and then show your successes when those exist. We're trying to engage the non-traditional audiences. I love speaking to master gardeners, and we'll do it anytime, but the master gardeners are usually more aware of the problem than others are. And so how to get to some of these other audiences, tell our story better, continue to expand the Wild Spotter platform as EDDMapS Lite, and then really embrace new technology as it's available. A few success stories. The first Asian giant hornet, murder hornet, is now called Northern giant hornet, was actually reported through EDDMapS when it was found in Washington State a few years ago. We've also had first reports in the U.S. Russian mallow was found in South Dakota and reported through EDDMapS. The first Brazilian pepper tree that we know about in Georgia was found on the Jekyll Island Causeway, and that was reported and was treated the next day. And then the first report of Cogon grass, first known report of Cogon grass in North Carolina, was reported through EDDMapS, and that location was visited the next day. So finally, what's next? We're looking at ways to integrate drone photography for small projects, so you can get much better, much higher resolution imagery when you're using the app in the field. We're looking at ways to make it fun, to have competitions, to give rewards, even if they're just virtual rewards, to better engage the users, to keep them coming back and using the app. And then obviously we're looking at ways to integrate artificial intelligence, hopefully using some of the tools that Google and Apple have built, integrate those tools into the app so we can do a better job of helping the user identify what the species are. With that, I want to thank my team in Tifton of programmers and biologists that make all of this happen, as well as the different agencies that have funded us through the years to make everything that you've seen possible. And with that, I will stop talking, and hopefully I'm not too far over, and introduce you to our 2 new mascots. We now, for educational purposes, have a Argentine black and white tegu, as well as a cane toad. And if you want to get an audience attention, then you pull out this 3-foot lizard, and everybody will look up from what they're doing. So thank y'all for having me, and hopefully there's some time for a few questions.
That was terrific. Thank you so much, Chuck. Yes, that would get our attention for sure up here. We do have a couple questions coming in on the chat, and I'd love to go over those with you. First, a couple of questions about the app. I think that some people are right now downloading the app and looking at it, and a couple of questions are coming up. One of them is, well, actually, let me start with an overall question, which is, do you want reports of invasive species anywhere? Do you want it in the home landscape and in our greenways and natural areas? Is this anywhere?
Yeah. So yes, anywhere, but not something that was intentionally planted. And so know, we're looking for escape populations. It really does not, where you start running into issues if you report everybody's Bradford pear in their backyard. And but when we see escape populations of these species, that's what we're really looking for.
Okay, that helps a lot.
I didn't clarify that better,
helps.
but
yeah.
I mean, the others are problems, but they're not. They were intentionally put there. Whether they should be or not, it's a whole nother discussion. But we're looking at ones that were not intentionally put there.
Okay, thank you. And then questions specific to the app. One of them is, can you report in more than one state? And I believe you can, there's a part of the menu in the app where you can change state.
Yes, and the only reason that you would do that is if you were on vacation and in Montana, and so you wanted the species in your app to be more Western specific than Southeastern specific. If you're going from North Carolina to South Carolina or to Virginia or to Georgia, the species are going to be the same no matter which state you're in, and it's not going to limit you. The only reason you're choosing state is to get in the species list. And so as long as you have the species that you're reporting available, and there's even a way to hit the server, there's even a way to type a name in and go to the server and report anything. And so I didn't go through all of that, but there's a lot you can do with your My List, and you don't have to change state if you drive across into Tennessee and take a report. It'll work just fine there that way.
And it's going to remember or log your reports for wherever you are. If I was visiting Montana and I made a report, it'll come up in my list. But if I'm back at home in North Carolina, it'll come up.
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
I mean, you may need to change the state if you were in Montana, but if you're just in a neighboring state, there's no reason to change the state.
Okay, thank you. So how about distribution maps? Are those available on the app, or that's something you want to use the laptop or the computer version?
So at the species level, currently they are available in the app. So you can you can choose a species. Let's say you choose kudzu. It's going to give you pictures, information, and also a distribution map, and it's going to center it around where you currently are, so you can see what's been reported around you. But then all of that information is available also on the website, and we're going to be improving where you can see all species around you or recent reports around you. That's going to be built into the next version of the app. So these are all works in progress. So we've got a work plan each year, and we know what features we're going to be adding and how we're going to improve each year.
We know that firsthand with our own intranet. We have a wish list all the time of improvements we want to make.
and we always love feedback. So, if anybody on this thing starts playing around with the app or has any problems, always reach out, because that's how we fix things. That's how we make things better. And it always seems to be a work in progress. But the nice thing about it is that our programmers are located here. And so, if it's a small problem, then it's something normally I can walk across the hall and say, hey, we need this fixed. And it'll be fixed quickly, or this needs to be tweaked, or this new feature needs to be added. So my email address is on the screen. So feel free to email me any suggestions or comments or feedback you have.
Terrific. And regarding the wild spotter, excuse me, that you mentioned. So wild spotter, is it available in North Carolina yet?
So it is for the National Forest only right now. So when you open up it shows you the public lands that are near you. And so right now it's just going to show you the National Forests that are close to you. But the hope is in the next couple of years, we're going to be able to expand this to especially national parks. That's where I think the key will be from an educational standpoint, but then also the wildlife refuges. And then we've got a way to make it very easy for states to upload their state parks or their state forest and get those included as well. So that invitation is always open, but the focus is on the federal public lands to start with.
Okay. And WildSpotter is an app, or it's user on the website right now?
It is it's both an app and a website, and
okay.
So and so it's available anywhere. I see somebody had a question on the National Forest not showing up. I think that there's a couple of places where the management unit for the National Forest is like North Carolina National Forest, and it's not broken up into the individual national forest. And so we're going to go in and correct that, but we realize that how the forests are managed is not what's important. People know where they go recreate, and that's what we can do. But for this audience, I would say use EDDMapS. I was just making sure that you understood that if you did run across WildSpotter, all the data is going to the same place. And so since y'all would be a more educated audience, then you would be more likely to use the EDDMapS. I would point you to the EDDMapS app because you can report anywhere with it, and technically you can report anywhere with WildSpotter as well. But it's more geared toward probably this audience than just the general public.
Well, and that's great for us to know, because we share this stuff with the public. So for us to know, okay, EDDMapS is really detailed. It takes a little bit of learning. WildSpotter is going to be another opportunity for people to just become aware of their invasive species that exist. And then here they are taking a walk and they're seeing them in public lands. So that's great. Let's see. Can you remind us on the app what is meant by upload queue? What is meant by that?
Yes, that's a great question, and that is just where the records are stored on your phone until you submit them to the server. So that is, if you're out on a national forest or state forest and you don't have cell phone coverage, you can still use the app, but you can save it in this queue until you get somewhere with internet service, and then press upload to send the reports to us. Okay,
that makes sense. I wonder if you would share your screen and share the website just for a minute, so people can see the website.
Oh yeah,
that's where I first really started to dig into EDDMapS. It was on your website, and I wanted to just ask you a couple of quick little questions about using it that I found helpful. So this is where I start. And one place that I like is the species list. These up the top, the species distribution.
Oh yeah, distribution.
Yes. And that spot, I just wanted to call the attention of Master Gardener volunteers to that spot. Because just how it's set up, I needed to learn a little something to make it easier for myself. So you see how you've got these options up the top: plants, insects, fungi. Thank you for making that larger. And then you've got a chart or a list down below. Well, when you click on plants, it doesn't take you to, it takes you to a subset. You can sort of specialize. And what it starts with, though, is this list down below. It's listing all the plants. But if you chose shrubs, for example, what threw me a little bit is that it doesn't take you to a separate shrubs page. It just loads the shrubs right there on the bottom. That took me a little bit of learning. Okay, I'm not going anywhere else. I have to look at that chart to make sure that now it's shrubs. But that you can do some good things with that chart. You can sort it and look at it by state. So maybe you could walk us through that, Chuck, because that's kind of how I started wondering, where do I have Ailanthus around me? And where do I have it over here? So maybe you could just show us a little bit about navigating that page.
Yeah, and what is the best thing to do? And let's go to Ailanthus as the option. So if I switch, if you just choose plants, it's going to show you all the plants. If you choose one of these other options, it's going to shorten that list down to that option. And then if we're looking at Ailanthus Tree of Heaven, you can view that distribution by state, by county, and this is where you get the full county distribution map, or the points. And so when you go to the points, that's when you get this map, and that's really where you can zoom in to wherever you're located and see where points actually are on the map. And then each of these points, then, like this was a iNaturalist record that we pulled in, you can click on the pop-up, see that brief information, but also click on the actual record, and it will take you to the full information about that record and where it was located and the picture. And in this case, because it came from iNaturalist, it also will link it back over to the iNaturalist system, which also shows that it was that links back to EDDMapS and shows that it was tied into the EDDMapS system. So we tried to make this this part as easy as possible for the user. I mentioned the revisit option briefly, but if you are if you were out in the field and you treated this location, then there's a way for you to actually do a update to that record just directly from the website. And so but there's all kinds of things you can do on this page. You can now type in an address and it will zoom you directly to that location. So if I even did if I just type in Asheville here, I probably need to do Asheville, then this will zoom you straight into that and center the map on Asheville, and then see those points that are there. And so trying to make this as integrated and as and as easy to use as possible. And then you always have the option to go to species information, which will give you that page that I use the example of garlic mustard, but with the resources, with the pictures, with the maps and the listing source.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I really enjoyed. I enjoyed being able to zoom all the way in to say to myself, has someone reported this already? I'm walking on this greenway, or here I am, and somebody already reported this. That's how you do it. And I was just inclined to look at it on a computer. It was a little bit bigger screen, and I need to get better with the app. But I wanted to make sure we showed Master Gardeners that as well, because they might be sitting at home and looking around them about a certain species or helping someone else. Let's see, that is fantastic. I think I should wrap us up so that we have time for the rest of the program. But Chuck, thank you so much. I think there's so much more we could learn, and I could absolutely see a follow-up to this in using the app in more detail, or just talking through some of those new features that you're talking about as well. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of material that you're able to go through, and invasivesfree.org. I think somebody asked about the workshop we're doing in December, and so
yes,
if you go to that website, there's all the information there, and it's really geared toward grassroots groups doing work and getting them to network and learn new skills. So we're really excited about this. And we're going to hopefully offer it more often in different locations, if it's successful. So
excellent. Yes, and I will, as always, include these resources when we send a follow-up email to all of you listening today with all those links. So thank you so much, Chuck. It's great to have met you, and we really appreciate you presenting for North Carolina today.
No problem. Anytime. Thank y'all very much.
All right. Just before we move on to BOLOs, I just wanted to remind everybody that we've got some great invasive species resources for you. Back in June on Plants, Pests, and Pathogens, we talked a little bit about the North Carolina Invasive Plants Council. So I'm going to be linking that to you again in the resources and remind you how that broke it down by region, the invasive species in our own state by region. And then in terms of insects, we have a great publication on invasive forest pests. So I'll send you that link as well. But also just to remind you, if you find something that you don't know what it is, or someone brings you something and you don't know what it is, and you think, could this be invasive? Resources to use would include these, but also to remind you to bring it to your agent at the County Extension Center. That's our real, first stop, because they may be able to know what it is, first of all, or they have access to sending it in to Matt and Mike at the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, or reaching out to other NC State specialists. So please remember that all those resources are there for you. And now we will turn it over to Matt and Mike for bolos. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to them.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. I had offered to go first, but now I don't want to really be following Chuck, who was such a great presentation. But I guess I have to go with what I said. Can everyone hear me okay?
You sound great. Yes.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about bolos for the diseases in our plants that we'll be seeing. And let me share my screen. And the first thing to be on the lookout for is faux fall. And I warned Charlotte that I was going to drop a plant ID question, because this is out here on campus. Took this picture, these two pictures this morning of, it looks to me like a sasanqua, but it doesn't seem right. Every year it blooms, and around this time of year, late September, a very short bloom period. So this is to me a wonderful announcement of fall, but not quite fall yet. So Charlotte or Caroline, is this just a type of sasanqua, or is it some other species?
I would expect it's either a sasanqua variety or a hybrid with sasanqua. There's so many varieties now, and more are becoming hybrids between different species. I don't know if anybody out there is familiar with a particularly early blooming sasanqua with single pink flowers, but yeah, that's what I would expect.
Okay, well, anyway, it's a good sign, but we're not in fall yet. And keeping that in mind, there are some things that are kind of going on that may fool us. And I'm going to start out with a bolo quiz here, and I'll open the chat so I can see your answers. But the question is, what do these four woody plants have in common? So we've got an oak, probably a pin oak, a redbud, an elm, likely American elm, and a muscadine grape. So we can see kind of different things going on here, but does any of this look like it has a common thread to anyone? Just give a message to, or a moment to see if people want to pop something into the chat. I have to go all the way to, okay. They're all deciduous. Yes, they're all deciduous. They have brown leaves, or partially brown leaves anyway. All right, no takers. Well, other than that, drought was probably a good guess. But in this case, what all these have in common is, in fact, that they all tested positive for Xylella fastidiosa, or bacterial leaf scorch. Another thing that the top three have in common is these are all on campus here. So the next question, though, now that we know that they're all bacterial leaf scorch, what strikes you as unusual? And this may be a little subtle, but there are two things. One is, this is the first time we've ever talked about elm as a host for Xylella. It's been reported before, but this is the first year that we've seen it in North Carolina. We had a sample come into the clinic, and then Dr. Barbara Fair brought to my attention this elm tree, actually since last fall, that never had a chance to look at it, but went and looked at it in August, and sure enough, it tested positive for Xylella. It appears, at least if you read the Texas information, it says that this disease can actually kill an elm tree. And we'll see if that happens in our conditions, but it sure looks like it's hitting them harder than it does the oaks and the redbuds, or maybe even than the sycamores, which we know get so much damage by it. The other unusual thing here is that that's muscadine grape. So it's called Pierce's disease on grape, but muscadine is, according to the report that Bill Klein wrote up for this particular sample, is resistant. So it may have symptoms because there was stress like drought, and you don't have to necessarily remove that vine if it's a muscadine. On the vinifera grapes, Pierce's is a more serious disease, but on the muscadines, apparently you can get recovery. So we have not seen a case. I think we may have, I'm not sure if we have one this year, but it has been a while since we've had it on that particular group of grapes. So be on the lookout for apparently foliage coloration on trees that are actually doing that because they have bacterial leaf scorch. The main ones you want to look for, of course, would be these four plus the sycamores and plane trees. Which kind of brings a segue into not leaving the idea necessarily of the faux fall, but another theme here for the bolos, which is the two-way street between plant stress and disease. This is a view of a neighbor's yard. My wife and I were out taking a walk on Sunday and noticed that this is not faux fall now, this is faux winter, where these cherries have dropped almost all of their leaves. And I've been looking around. It's dangerous, by the way, if you're out on the roads where I am on the fourth Monday of the month, because I may be kind of paying attention to what's going on out in the landscapes in preparation for PP. But I've been looking around, and just every ornamental cherry that I see appears to have this defoliation going on now for several weeks. So I asked the neighbor, and he was okay with us taking some leaves, which I brought back to the lab. And it turned out that there was quite a bit of cherry leaf spot on these caused by the fungus Blumeriella japi, and a little bit of Passiflora circumcissa. Both of these can cause shot hole, and you see a little bit of that here. But more importantly, they can cause early defoliation. And depending on how early it is, of course, you're going to get more stress or less stress on the tree. So far, I haven't noticed it, making these trees the next year necessarily having fewer blooms or that sort of thing. But maybe the defoliation isn't occurring quite early enough for that to happen. But then on the other hand, just speculating, maybe this could be contributing to the stress that we see taking out suddenly some of our random prunus species in the landscapes here in central North Carolina. Another example from campus here, a couple of other fungi, Calototricum, so that would be anthracnose, plus alternaria, which I would think is secondary, causing some real severe damage here on the leaves of this hosta. But the interesting thing is when we look at it in the landscape itself, and this picture just taken a couple of days ago, yesterday, you can see on one side of the bed, there's also some hellebores mixed in there, but one side of the bed, the hostas are really severely damaged by these fungi, and the other side, apparently the same cultivar of hosta, although I'm not sure in the back corner here, but they are much less diseased, although they're also smaller. And what I think is going on here is the shade from this Japanese maple here. It's kind of a little canyon in between two buildings, but I think the shade from that maple is what's making enough of a difference that the hostas on this side are, although they're growing maybe less quickly, they're happier this time of year than the ones on this side. So here we have the relationship of not the disease causing stress, well, it certainly is, but stress predisposing the plants to the disease, at least in my interpretation of what's going on here. Another example of this, a recent photograph from a landscape in Wake County, where we can see some hydrangeas in a bed underneath a cryptomeria. There's a cryptomeria toward the back here, and then this Chamaecyparis up closer to the front. Now, they were planted at different times, these hydrangeas, so I can't guarantee there are not other differences, but it's a sharp contrast between the ones that are here in full sun and the ones that get quite a bit of shade in the back. In fact, if we take a closer look, we can see how the ones in the front, and every hydrangea pretty much in the state is going to have Cercospora leaf spot this time of year. And that's what this looks like here, with the purplish margins and the centers becoming a very pale, almost whitish color. But it's much more severe there on those plants in the full sun than it is in the shade. So another example of something to be on the lookout for, Cercospora leaf spot on hydrangea, and also to notice whether your plant is really in a location that it's happy with, whether it be from the amount of shade, the amount of moisture, and so forth. This is an interesting example that came in, staying with the idea of hydrangea, but now moving to the hydrangea paniculata, the limelight sample that was submitted from New Hanover County this month, photo taken by the landscaper. And I sort of misinterpreted this when I had a first glance at it. I thought, oh yeah, well, those flower heads are just, naturally senescing, and that's what's going on. But I didn't read his comments about the defoliation. I did see that they were concerned that maybe it was transplant stress, since it was only, and so these were only installed a few months ago. But had I looked more carefully at first, well, I did eventually read it, so that's the good thing. And one of the points was about all the defoliation, and that they were concerned about nematodes. And sure enough, if you look at the roots, well, if you look at the roots at first, they seem to be all right. There doesn't seem to be any root rot going on. But then looking at them even more carefully, yeah, there's some knots there. And dissecting it out, it's hard to see here, but you can see kind of the shiny, round tail ends of these nematodes, these female root knot nematodes inside the galls there. So that was confirmed as root knot nematode. Only the second time we've seen it on hydrangea. Both cases were hydrangea paniculata. Both cases were this cultivar, and both cases were, believe it or not, in the Wilmington area. And since we talked about bacteria, fungi, and nematodes, we can't leave the viruses out. So be on the lookout for rose rosette. This is almost surely what this is. Notice the reddish coloration that's retained in the new growth. The unnaturally thick canes, they may be wider than the cane that they grew out from. There's some mosaic here. The flowers, they're almost absent now, kind of a witch's broom. So this is an advanced state. These should really have been removed some time ago to prevent the further spread of the rose rosette. And to just kind of quickly finish off with a virus-like idea, we believe this is a virus, but it's still being tested. I sent some material off just yesterday to a USDA lab that specializes in viruses of ornamentals. But if you do see a mosaic, a model ring spot, some have some necrotic flecking in the chlorosis, in the yellowing there on our beauty berries, then please do submit that as at least an image sample to the clinic so that we can kind of get an idea of how much is out there. A fairly recent problem, it seems, but we're still trying to get a handle on that. Now, this would be different from the symptoms of, let's say, exposure to a synthetic auxin, a 2,4-D type herbicide, which we did also get a sample submitted image, but there's more malformation there and less of the modeling and mosaic symptom. With that, if you are not satiated with bolos after this presentation today, you can always go to our website, the menu item on the left, click on bolos, and you'll have your month-by-month list. So with that, I will stop sharing and take a quick look at the chat.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
I really enjoyed the pictures you had today where you showed us the landscape view and then the roots and then zoomed in. That was really, really great.
I'm glad that was helpful and enjoying.
Yes.
Mike, I will say I have seen those symptoms on Calicarpa before on beautyberry. So I'll start keeping an eye out for any specific locations and send them in if I see more.
Yeah, please do, or at least send a picture so that we can kind of get an idea. All right, I don't see questions in the chat, so I will turn it over to Matt.
Well, thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. Good morning. There's there is a potential mite link to the beautyberry 2 that Mike didn't mention, that I'm pretty excited about, because some viruses like the rosette virus are transmitted by mites, so we're looking into that as well. But let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this now. And yeah, so let's talk about some late season arthropods. So the arthropods are around, but they're winding down. So you're able to find a lot of things that would have been present in the summer. But we're going to have kind of a couple things that you might notice more, and a couple things that might be a little bit more annoying. So to begin, let's talk about some fall invaders. So this is the time of year, this month and next month, maybe into November or so, we're going to start, depending on where you are in the state, we're going to start to see some of the home invaders. So one of the big ones are the stink bugs. All these home invaders are coming into the homes because in the natural habitat, they'd be going into leaf litter or under bark as the days start to shorten and it starts to get cooler to overwinter. And the running theme between these arthropods is that these are insects that overwinter as adults. And so they can move easily to these places. So you'll see this influx of insects right now. And in the spring, when we start again, I'll be talking about them leaving the home. So these are the two periods where you'll see these the most. So stink bugs, brown marmorated stink bugs especially, but other ones is, of course, this one was trying to hide in some blinds that were on my window and wasn't doing a very good job, of course, because I was very easily able to see it. So what other things might you see? Other bugs. So kudzu bugs are known to come in homes, as well as box elder bugs. Box elder bugs typically found when you have box elder trees, a type of maple around. These will come in. All these bugs are just a nuisance. They're not dangerous to humans or pets. They can stink a little bit, but they're just more of a nuisance. And with all these insects and arthropods that I'm talking about, the invaders, you really other than kind of weather stripping and making sure your house is as sealed as possible, that's really all that can be done. There's nothing you can do to spray. There's no sites for you to spray to kill these things. So just make sure that you've covered up all gaps and windows and doors and things like that. Another group of invaders, it's been in the literature, I haven't seen much of it myself, are the cluster flies. They're a type of technically not anymore, a type of blowfly. They have they're drab flies with these crinkly golden hairs on their thorax. That's fairly unique among flies. And so if you see these in the homes, that's again, their adults are overwintering. And these are actually earthworm parasites. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure. Depends on what type of earthworm you like or dislike. Of course, ladybugs, people love ladybugs because they're so pretty and they eat aphids, but some are highly invasive, like the Harmonia axaritis, some people call it the harlequin ladybug or the multicolored Asian ladybug. And even their typical ladybugs, which is from Europe, may invade homes in high numbers. They can become a nuisance. They can sometimes stain with the reflex bleeding, and they are known to even bite people in their homes. So ladybugs aren't all good. And if they invade your home, again, there's some gaps somewhere. They're really just looking for a place to overwinter. And then wasps. So the wasp colonies, the social wasp colonies, these are the paper type wasps. This is literally a paper wasp, or they call them umbrella wasps sometimes. And here's a European hornet. This is not a murder hornet. And we've been getting some emails about them now. That's because the colonies are at their largest at this time of year. They're producing males and new queens. They will go out and mix around and mate with each other. The males will die, the workers will die soon, and all that will be left are the mated queens. Now, these mated queens also overwinter, and they need to find refuge for the winter, and so they will sometimes come in homes. So if you see a lot of wasps entering the home now, or if you see, again, when we talk about in the spring, them leaving the home, that's because they were a mated overwintering queen that will start a new colony in the spring when it wakes up. Then again, there's going to be a lot of other larger arthropods hanging on. This is the time of year when you're going to see the big barn or orb weaver spiders. They have now attained their full size. They're mating. they're getting ready to lay eggs that will overwinter and then they will die. Same with the mantises. Mantises only live have one generation per year, only live for a year. They were very small earlier, and now they're getting bigger. Again, they're going to go out, mate. Unfortunately for the males, some of the males of especially the Carolina mantis, our native one, maybe they die happy, I guess, but that one has no more head, but is still mating. So you're going to see these things around as the season moves on until it gets too cold for them to survive, and then their eggs will survive over the winter. One of my favorite flies is about to come out. This is the type of March fly called Penthetria. It doesn't have any common name, but here's a male and here's a female. So if you see these black flies flying around, October is typically when I see them, around Halloween, and they are just feeding on leaf litter and fungus and things like that out in the environment. And these do not bite, so just enjoy them. They're kind of nice looking flies, I think, and this is the time of the year you might see them. This is also the time of year you might see the velvety larvae of soldier beetles. So soldier beetles are out and about right now on the goldenrod. They're much more abundant in the late summer, early fall, and mid-fall. And their larvae kind of cruise around on sidewalks, on driveways, around the environment. They're hunters, they're predators. They're not harmful to plants or humans or pets, but they do sometimes show up in large numbers around homes and get inside the homes. Again, this velvety appearance is very characteristic of soldier beetle larvae. And finally, I just wanted to take a poll. So have you seen a Joro spider this year? So this is, speaking of invasives, this spider right here on the left, this one, not this one, showed up in North America in 2014 in Georgia and has since been spreading around, or at least landing around. They balloon, and so they'll reach far distances. As young spiders, you won't see them for most of the year because they're so tiny, and this time of year is when they start to kind of grow huge and noticeable. So in the chat, if you have seen a Joro spider, not the golden silk spider, then please put it in the chat where you are. And just to show you some data, so this is from iNaturalist, the data for Joro spiders. So because it was around the Atlanta area where they were first found and are most abundant, they're kind of more coming around the Charlotte area in the western part of the state. Whereas the golden silk spiders, which actually have a lot of records, more records than I thought in the mountains and the central part of the state, from ballooning. But this species is mostly a coastal and Gulf Coast species. It is native, and so you find a lot more density on the southeastern coast. So I'm going to go in the chat and take a look for some questions and some of these records. See if anybody has said anything. So
yeah, Matt, I noticed on your Joro distribution there, can they drive?
Yeah,
it was like they were moving up I-85.
Yeah, yep. It must be just people stopping at rest stops or something and seeing them. So that is another thing to mention too about all this, is like these records are just where people notice things. And so oftentimes you see them more records in cities and places where there's more population, because without surveys, it's really gonna kind of just, you have to come in contact with these things. So I'm just going to read some of the chat things. So my wife saw 2 large orb weavers yesterday and swore she would never be able to go outside again. Well, I will tell you that although large and scary looking, they are completely harmless. They're basically blind. They need to be in their web, and they're very immobile outside of their web. So they will not harm anyone, and they will eat lots of pests for you. I mean, they'll eat whatever they can catch in their webs, so that could be pests or beneficials. But just think about this. They are way more afraid of you. They think we are terrible killing machines, which is true, more so than they are to us. So just think about that. Expecting the okay, so Barbara Pleasant, garden writer in Southwest Virginia, is speculating that the arrival of samurai wasps in the forest there, which parasitizes brown marmorated stink bug eggs, may be responsible for dramatically reducing the populations there. Any opinion about that this is happening in North Carolina? So that wasp is an egg parasitoid. It is fairly widespread now. In fact, I know the person who gave the name to that wasp. He was an expert in that group of wasps, but they're not going to be 100% effective. So any biological control cannot completely reduce the populations. and they have been around for years. So it's hard to say whether there's a lag. It's also hard to say whether seasonal differences can change change the populations of the stink bugs more dramatically than, say, parasitoids. So there's a lot of factors that will affect the population of any certain species each year. So without studying it in really full detail, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. So yep, Gene, you sent me the golden silk spider. Thought it was a drawer spider. Somebody did. So reports of flying spiders. Yeah, I mean, I know you're making a joke, Gene, but they do. One of the really interesting things is the ballooning of spiders. It used to be thought that, these are when spiderlings, very young spiderlings, hatch. They extrude a silk strand, and they used to think it caught the wind, and it may do so somewhat. But part of what they're saying now is that there's actually a charge difference between the silk and the earth, and that helps repel the spider from the earth, which is pretty crazy. My orb weavers are big now and build beautiful webs in the corner. Yep, great Halloween decorations. Now, I will say that Nancy Hinkle down at University of Georgia says that in the area right now, especially because there's so many Joro spiders, she said you don't have to buy all the fake Halloween stuff because it already looks like Halloween. So all that webbing everywhere, which is probably terrible and terrifying in a lot of ways. But again, it's a very seasonal thing. Luckily, those spiders are really only large and active for a couple months of the year, and then we don't really even notice them the rest of the year. So with that, thank you for your participation, and I'm going to stop sharing so Caroline can speak with us.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much, Matt. Get myself set up here. Okay, so I'm going to move us along with our monthly resource spotlight. And this month, I wanted to feature the Bradford Pear Bounty Program. This is the North Carolina Bradford Pear Bounty Program. As we all know, Bradford pear is very easily recognized in the springtime when it flowers, but as we know, it has become both troublesome and invasive. This program is helping to incentivize the removal of the Bradford pear trees from home landscapes. Now, this is a partnership with the NC State Extension, as well as a number of other partners, the NC Forest Service, the NC Wildlife Federation, Department of Agriculture, and the North Carolina Urban Forest Council. So first and foremost, the program is really seeking to raise awareness of the problem. And I liked this graphic. This graphic is from their Facebook page. So they have a great Facebook page, which I'll send you the link for. And their social media has reached over 215,000 people so far. And so that's really helping people become aware of the problem. Their website has a great identification page of what is a Bradford pear for those that might not recognize it. But the Bradford pear, I found the history of this interesting. It's a cultivar of Pyrus Kelleriana. And Pyrus Kelleriana is native to China and Korea. And it came to the US in hopes that it could be used to develop resistance to the highly infectious fire blight disease. So this was around 1900, and there were orchards in the Pacific Northwest being grown of Pyrus communis, or a common edible pear, but they were becoming decimated by fire blight. So the USDA worked with actually Arnold Arboretum in Boston to send some plant explorers off to China to look for possible resistant pears. They brought back Pyrus Kelleriana. Ultimately, Bradford, the cultivar, was one of a sapling that had shown these distinct characteristics, as often happens with a horticultural variety. And it showed characteristics that seemed appealing to the nurserymen. It had this plant, Bradford, had no thorns. The flowers, of course, were proliferous, and thick glossy leaves and a nice rounded form. So the tree started to be propagated in the nursery trade and distributed widely in the home landscape, and also in places that were really kind of challenging such as public parks and parking lots, and it thrived. We know it thrived. So on the North Carolina Pear Bounty website, they've got these great images to help identify Bradford pear. And one of the, claims to fame originally was that Bradford pear was not fertile. It would not fruit. And that worked fine as long as the Bradford pear was the only cultivar around. So that cultivar was not fertile, and so it wouldn't fruit. The kicker came when other cultivars started to be developed and were introduced. So even if one other cultivar was planted in your neighborhood, it could then become cross-pollinate with the Bradford pears. So suddenly they started fruiting, and now it spreads widely through birds who eat the fruit and then defecate the seeds. And we've now got enough genetic diversity through all these seedlings that have escaped to keep the plants easily fruiting. So another problem that you know about is that they are structurally weak. Basically, they have weak branch unions. So the limbs become prone to snapping and splitting under the weight, especially during ice and windstorms. The flowers are particularly strong in fragrance, and many find them unpleasant. And in a large quantity, they can be overwhelming. And so this Bradford Pear program was developed to promote the removal of the trees and replanting with many of our wonderful native trees that are beneficial and have some of the same good ornamental qualities. One thing that I like about their website is this list of the replacement trees. So these are native lookalikes that are being offered as a replacement tree. And this page in itself is a resource to share with folks looking for something else to plant in their landscape. What I like also is that each of these species, they are a link to the plant toolbox. So if we were to look at serviceberry, we would link right out to the plant toolbox record on that plant. Okay, so how do you participate in the program? Well, a homeowner needs to take a before picture while the tree is still standing and go ahead and have the tree removed. There's actually a part of their website that lists some tree removal companies that are offering discounts for removal of Bradford pears. Then take an after picture of the tree down and pre-register for an event. The whole program is event-based, and people bring their before and after pictures to the event, and they receive a native replacement tree. And it's right now the program offers up to 5 replacement trees for 5 Bradford pears removed. These replacement trees are anywhere from 3 to 5 gallon size. So they're a good size, ranging in height from 5 to 8 feet. So it's a good replacement deal. So to stay up to date, following them on Facebook is probably the best way. Right now they are hosting 5 events a year. That's what they've been able to do. And they've got a couple events coming up around the state, as you can see, in late October and November. Pre-registration is definitely required. And right now the events are limited only by funding, only by their ability to purchase replacement trees. So they're looking for donations and sponsors of events like this. On average, about 200 trees are given away per event. And if you're interested in learning more about this, talk to your agent, who can then reach out about maybe hosting an event in an area, your area. And with that, we will move back on to our announcements for the month. Okay, our next Learn, Grow, Share Showcase webinar is coming up November 29th. This is the webinar series that celebrates the work of Master Gardener volunteers and gives an opportunity to share ideas and inspiration. In each webinar, we try to feature a local project, and the presenters are Master Gardener volunteers and extension agents. So during this November 29th webinar, we're going to learn about the Nature at Home Yard Certification Program that's offered in New Hanover County and the Native Plants Initiative launched in Caldwell County. And very soon we will have the sign up for this on the EMG internet calendar. Also, just to give you a heads up, if you missed the September 21st Learn, Grow, Share showcase that was on Seed Libraries, the recording is now available on the Master Gardener intranet under continuing education. The Extension Gardener plant identification and use courses are an opportunity to brush up on your plant ID skills. And they offer it in a number of different ways. So you can find a way that works best for you. They're offered both asynchronously and led by an instructor. So this is an example where the course is self-paced, but it does have live components where the instructor is interacting with the students and giving feedback. And that's for a length of 6 weeks. It also offers an asynchronous self-study option. So this is totally self-paced. You don't have any live components and you have access to the materials for a while. So the next ones coming up this fall include plant propagation, trees, shrubs, and conifers, and annuals, perennials, vines, and ground covers. And NC State, in partnership with NC Botanic Garden, offers a series of therapeutic horticulture classes. Coming up next is course number 4, which is program management. And in this course, the students will work with real-world examples to discuss and reflect on the best practices for managing a therapeutic horticulture program. Courses 1 through 3 are prerequisites for this course. And all of these courses are fully online and self-paced. Okay, Extension Gardener is also offering some exciting trips in 2024. And these are opportunities for you to travel with fellow Master Gardener volunteers and explore some botanically wonderful destinations. Coming up in January, we have Costa Rica. So January 22nd to 29th, this promises to be a wonderful week filled with visits to national parks, conservation organizations, botanical gardens, and even a spice farm. Plus, plenty of time to enjoy the magnificent scenery. So check that out, and I hope you can join us in January. The other opportunity is to the Netherlands. So this will be in April 9th to 18th. And this is, of course, an iconic destination for springtime and filled with gardens galore. So check those out. And that will take us to the finale of this month's Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. And we look forward to next month, which wraps up our season. So we will have our final webinar of the 2023 season on October 24th with our very own Matt Bertone and Mike Munster, Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. And they always make a fun finale for us with wrapping it all up and challenging us with their game, critter or not. So we'll be tested on what we know. Again, we thank our guest today, Chuck Bargeron, and all of his knowledge and information on EDDMapS. And we thank Matt and Mike for their presentations as well. We wish you all a wonderful month ahead.